What kind of DM are you? The more we can figure out the answer to that question as we are preparing for a new campaign, the better a campaign we will run for ourselves and for our players. So let's figure out who we are. I've done a series of videos and blog posts at alphastream.org looking at how we can create a cool campaign, how we get started, how we get established, and think through the type of campaign we're going to run. And a big consideration of that is actually to go back and say, wait a minute, who am I? What do I like running? What do I like doing? What motivates me? Why am I doing things a certain way? And the more that we understand ourselves and know what we want out of ourselves, then we can figure out exactly what kind of campaign to run. And I'm going to run through a series of questions that I think are really useful for examining who we are. It's like one of those things that, in a magazine you find at the dentist's office that like asks you what kind of people you want to date. And you go, oh, actually, I learned a lot about myself. The good ones. I hope these questions will help this way. So first thing I'm going to get into is published versus homebrew. Do you like to write an adventure that's all of your own, right? You create it whole cloth. The whole thing is your own homebrew creation, maybe inspired loosely by the things you've seen and read, but you're just making your own? Do you like to run something that someone else wrote for you, maybe official Wizards of the Coast, maybe third party, and just exactly what they wrote, that's what you deploy? I have some great friends who do that. And then a lot of us, myself included, love to take something that's published and modify it, add to it. I will create significant pieces that I will change up, that I will add to, that I will subtract based on the kind of things that I like. Knowing your tendencies here can be really helpful as we're planning on a campaign, because if you love creating your own thing, then it doesn't matter what the company has published, whether they have 20 adventures for your RPG or 0, you're going to make your own thing. And what might be more useful is to think through the influences that you want to bring in to help you spice up your own creation. The more that you're happy to run something as written, then you want to find a really perfect thing, or as good as you can, so that you will be excited to write it, to run it the way it was done, the way it was designed initially. But understanding those tendencies are important, right? Especially the more we get into modifying, because now when we want to modify, we need to have that space to really examine the work, the type of campaign, think through what we want to change up, identify those pieces, figure out what to do that without getting into our game prep and making it super difficult. Similarly with creating, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, do you like to expand as you go or create anything up front? That will vary how you look at this, right? And a very important thing is whether you stick to what is written. And this is true even if you wrote it, right? So I make my own homebrew campaign, I'm all set, and as we start playing, is that sacred? Or to what extent am I totally happy with just changing it up? You know what? The players are zigging, I'm going to zag, and we're going to make this work, right? I have this idea that this is a plane spanning campaign, and they actually just want to be in these 2 planes. Are you cool with changing that all up, right? The more that we say, no, look, this is Curse of Strahd, and it's this way, versus, hey, you guys want to play Curse of Strahd and run theatrical performances in the towns and create your own merchant camp, right? Like, okay, maybe we change to what you want. So ask yourself those questions, understanding to what extent you want to be creating things you are happy to modify. This is a very helpful basis to prepare for your campaign work. We can also look at the pillars of play. D&D has made a big point out of saying that there are these 3 pillars: exploration, combat, role play. But we can apply them, of course, to any RPG, and we can ask ourselves, do we have a favorite pillar, right? Are you all about the combat and how fun that is to the game? And that's your emphasis? Like, that's really good to understand about yourself. Or if combat is cool, but you really want to ham it up with role play and get into deep intrigue and have players, being passionate about their interests and making big impassioned pleas in the game. Maybe there are romances, or they're trying to take control of the town and be leaders. And the more that that's taking place, then that will point towards a certain type of campaign and a certain type of DM that you are. If you love exploration and skill checks and lore and discovering new areas, going across the ground, the land, maybe you're doing exploration of some kind, right? That is really worth knowing. And we want to balance that with our player interests, right? If we super love roleplay and our players are all into exploration, we want to find a way to balance that out, right? To add some things there. We may also find that we're particularly good at, say, roleplay and exploration, but we've never really felt strong about how we create combats in a particular role-playing game, right? Maybe we're running Alien RPG and we're really good at setting up that feeling of danger and exploring the ship. We feel like that's always awesome in our game. But the moment that the alien starts tearing into players, we feel like we don't know how to make it cool. Like, it's just, now the horror aspect is there, it's real, it's in front of them, and it's just this blaster and rending, and we don't know how to make it challenging or cool. So we can identify that as a pillar that we want to develop, because it's hard to avoid pillars, right? We can have a favorite, we can have ones we use the most, but it's good to know where to put our emphasis and whether we should cross the pillars to make them work better. So for example, you might say, well, my players really love exploration, but I like to focus on role-playing and combat. What you can do is then bring their pillar into yours, right? So you're having combats, and as they're fighting, they see an emblem on a jacket, and they can discover something about who they're fighting, right? Some mystery is unraveled. They are dealing with traps, but they find lore about the place. They are role-playing and learning more information, right? So everything gets that exploration flavor into it. Crossing pillars can help us bridge the gap between what we like and our players like, and can also be something that we use to develop our strengths, right? We are putting a little bit of combat into our role play so that we can get better at the idea of different types of combats. And it's not just about the pillars, but also the genre that we're leaning into, right? And genres often have subtypes. It's really useful to understand that. I mentioned aliens a while ago. We can think about different horror types like Call of Cthulhu, and we can think about something like Deadlands, which is Western but has horror. So you can think about what your main genre might be, and then the different subgenres, right? There are a lot of types of horror. Horror is broken down into all those different types quite well, actually, in the Van Richten's guide. That book is actually fantastic. There is a guide to horror that Evil Hat has, which is fantastic. So reading up on these can help you think about, okay, I'm going to run a horror campaign or horror RPG, but for my campaign, I want to change it up a bit. Maybe I want to have more in this sort of horror that is about the unknown rather than what's in front of you. And I'm not going to do body horror, or I'm going to, you can think about that subgenre. Or in a game that combines elements, Alien is space and has exploration and things like that can be quite exciting. Coriolis, similarly, is a space RPG that you can easily bring horror into, but you can also pull it out. And Alien, you could do so as well. De-emphasize that horror, have it show up at certain parts, and in other times, emphasize other type of genres, right? So those subgenres can be really interesting. And this is really good to identify, right? Like, I enjoy horror, but I don't love it. And I don't love like the grosser stuff, right? So when I'm running Aliens or Deadlands, I emphasize those other areas. I love the space stuff. I love the interesting questions. What is it to be human? What is it to be an android? What is it to be an alien? Corporations versus people, right? Those kinds of parts of the genre, those subgenres are really interesting to me. And I like using the horror lens to tell that story. But I'm not just telling that horror, body horror, tearing apart kind of story. Similarly, when I'm running Deadlands, I love the Western side. I love the different cultures that are going on. I love the questions of what your hero is trying to do. And the horror can make it sort of interesting at various parts, but it's not the only subgenre I'm focused on. And all of this causes us to reflect on the game that we're choosing to run and how flexible is it, right? Some games you can really easily slide back and forth on the type of genre you're going to put in based on the role-playing game itself and your style. So think through how easy it is to change that so that we're not pushing against a genre that shouldn't be there, right? Curse of Strahd and comedy, a little bit, but harder, right? So we think through that as to how well it's going to work. Aliens and horror or in comedy, comedy in Aliens is done as a way of releasing tension and then hitting you hard with horror right after, right? Like the famous dinner meal in the movie. So we want to think about how flexible it is for those subgenres we want to bring in. Another question we can look at when we examine the kind of DM we are is how we like to allow for player campaign interactions, right? The easiest way to run a game is to say, well, you guys go into the caves of chaos, you tear up one, layer of monsters after another, and at the end you have finished, the land is safe, congratulations. And another is to say, well, you meet these goblins and here are the things they want. They have goals, they have motivations, you do too. What do you want to do? And the players go, well, actually, what if we can get the goblins doing this? Now, the more that we ask those kinds of questions and set up those kinds of interactions and encourage them or allow for them when the players come up with them, the players start having impacts, right? They can change the way the game goes. The hobgoblins could form an alliance or the goblins could undermine it, right? Players start to come up with ideas like, we're going to actually bring all the goblins back to the keep on the borderlands, right? Like, these are possibilities, and do we want to allow these? Do we want to encourage them? And there is a lot of fun that can come with that if we feel good about it. So understanding to what level, to what extent we want to do these kinds of player campaign interactions, really useful. Do we want to have players doing things like strongholds, right? A base they control. That base could be on a ship. It can be in space. It could be like a spaceship. It can be anything depending on the game we have. But if we empower our characters, our players, to have this stronghold, something they own and develop, that gives them a lot of agency and a lot of interaction with the campaign, because they can start exerting that strength on there and shaping the world in ways that they can decide, right? And we have to be cool with that if we want to do that. Patrons, right? They may be part of a patron or organization or a faction and influence those other goals. They might change the patron themselves. They might replace the patron. They might cause factions to splinter, die, combine, spring up. They might run organizations a certain way or another. All of that can really change up the nature of a campaign and can keep it very exciting for us if we feel good about that. Tools like downtime, right? What we do in between the raiding of the spaceship or the cleaning out of a part of the caves of chaos, right? What happens in that in between time can be nothing. We don't talk about it. Get back, you've healed, go back there. Or it can be, interact with the NPCs, make decisions, shape the nature of the world, romance that person, win over that noble family. If we bring downtime-like activities into our organization, we are empowering, or into our campaign, we are empowering the PCs to have these kinds of interactions. And ultimately asking ourselves that question, whether players can change the world and how much, right? So knowing what kind of DM you are, whether you like these aspects, whether you feel good about them, lets us know where we sit. And then we can think to ourselves, I don't do that a lot, but I want to do more of it. Or I do a ton of it, and actually it overwhelms my players, right? These kinds of questions help us know of what we're going to do for our next campaign. Along that question of how much the players can control things is the overall question of emergent play. Are you running a campaign as DM so that the players experience a cool story, right? Are you the director with this cool series that you've written, or a cool movie, cool novel, and they're going to go through it? That's awesome. I've played many a campaign where, as a player, I enjoyed just seeing what the DM had come up with, experiencing that story, and having some minor influence in it. I've also had some great times in campaigns where I created my own story as player, right? I drove the action, or a big part of it, along with the other players, and we kind of decided how things went. We had a lot more. The play came from emerged, right? Emergent play. The play emerged out of our choices, our options, what we cared about. In some cases, you might, and this tracks to my last video that I did on greater narrative control for players, you might join together to even define what the world is, right? And that can be something you do at the very beginning. It can be just something that you do throughout the game, depending on how comfortable you are with it, right? That we talked about last time. There are things that are cool and sometimes not cool about that, depending on players and DM. we can ask ourselves what the story is. Is the story the arc of what the villains are doing and how you oppose them? Is it the story just what the characters do? Is it how these intersect, right? You may feel like it's one or more of one or the other, depending on your style as DM, and that's important to know. The more that you are running a set story, right? I am running this campaign, and I'm running it as I want it, or the homebrew that I wrote, and this is how it's going to deploy, versus improv. I'm going to run these parts and see what happens. I have an outline of notes. They'll tell me what they want, and that's where we go in the land and what the story emerges. And so figuring out how you feel about emergent play, again, really helpful. The last question I like to really think about is, what is the goal that I have for learning when I'm approaching a particular campaign? These may change. My goals things that I want to learn and get better at or change, they change as time progresses, right? I accomplish some, others remain undone and are still emphasis, new ones creep up. But what is it that I want to learn as a DM, right? There may be new approaches I want to try out, right? Like I've read about this really neat system for exploring hexes. I've read about this really cool way to apply downtime interactions or to run a stronghold, right? Those may be things that I deliberately am setting as a goal of, I would like to learn this in my future campaigns. So when I'm coming up with a new campaign I want to run, I've got that goal and I'm thinking through, yeah, I want to do that. There may be new rules, right? That can be as broad as like, oh, I want to know the 2024 D&D rules, or I want to try out weapon masteries and maybe bring them into a different RPG, or I want to try ship combat in Star Trek, right? And I want to get a feel for that as I've heard about it, or something like Espergenesis, and I want to try out that combat in space and think about what it's like to fly in 3 dimensions and have a battle like that. Or nautical, as we're discussing on the Mastering Dungeons podcast, what is it like to have nautical battles? And when ships come together, I want to experience that and maybe both see what the rules are that exist and maybe even make my own rules, right? I may also have the goal of trying out new campaign types, right? I've never run a space opera type campaign and I want to do that. Or I've never run a Western. I've never run something that is based in a certain time period, whatever it may be, right? So those goals that we have for learning, things that we have yet to achieve but we want to, can be really helpful to identify. So I hope this video has been useful, right? Thinking through who we are as a DM, what kind of campaigns we want to run, new goals we can set for ourselves, approaches we want to try, having a better understanding of who we are. As we're thinking about the next campaign we want to create, understanding who we are as a DM becomes a huge asset in making the next campaign awesome. I hope this video has been useful. If you liked it, please give it the thumbs up. Huge thank you out there to everybody who is sharing these things, right? It's nice to give it a little thumbs up or a star, whatever it is on your social media thing. But when you actually repost it, reshare it, whatever you want to call it, that is awesome because it reaches the people that you know, not just the folks that I know. Thank you to those doing it. It's a huge boon. If you can, join my Patreon. It's awesome to have you as part of the community. Love the work that I do. You also become part of the Mastering Dungeons community, which is really sweet. So thank you again for that, and I'll see you next time.